This is Frankly MSP, where managed service providers get real.
Hey, and welcome to episode 13 of Frankly MSP, the podcast for managed service providers who want to boost their productivity, efficiency, and profitability. I'm your host, Jennifer Tribe. So we're now into month 6, lucky episode 13 of Frankly MSP, and I think we found a pretty good groove. Certainly, we've heard fantastic feedback from a number of you that you're enjoying the content and finding it helpful, which is, of course, the whole point, so we're very glad to hear that. And on quite a few episodes, I've been encouraging you to share your thoughts on the show notes. Only as it turned out, that wasn't possible. This comes from listener Andy Helsby. Andy, a big hat tip and thank you to you for taking the time to let us know that comments weren't enabled on our show notes. Very embarrassing, but the good news is that we have fixed that. So now I just know all of you have this pent-up avalanche of comments that you're dying to leave. We would love to hear them, so please tell us what you think. You'll find today's show notes at avik.com/franklymsp/013. Today on the show, I'm going to be talking to Dominic Price. Dom is a work futurist and the head of R&D at Atlassian based in Australia. He's responsible for managing 5 global R&D centers for Atlassian and is tasked with helping those teams and the company overall scale as efficiently and effectively as they can. And Dom and I are going to be talking about a neat little productivity trick called Unlearning that's about doing more by letting go. But first, of course, we turn to everyone's favorite MSP consultants, Richard Tubb and Carl Palachuk, for a look at what's going on in the world and how it affects MSPs.
You're listening to Frankly MSP, brought to you by Avik Networks.
Hi folks, Richard Tubb here at home in Newcastle upon Tyne in the northeast of the UK for your latest instalment of What's Going On. And I'm joined today at his home, or should I say his plague pit in Sacramento, California, by my really good friend and MSP expert, and he's got a cough today, Carl Palachuk. How are you feeling, Carl?
Well, it's mostly just a cough, so it's not quite the plague, but I appreciate your enthusiasm.
You're far enough away from me that I can mock you for it and not either pick up your cold or get a punch in the shoulder. So that's good for me. So what's been going on, Carl? What's caught your eye in the news lately?
Well, I just took delivery of a book called AI Anarchy Inc., Profiting in a Decentralized World with Artificial Intelligence and Blockchain. And it's by Patrick Schwartfeger. And the reason I like this book is he takes a very positive attitude about a world that's emerging that he says is going to have a lot more anarchy than what we're used to.
Tell me more about the book. So it's the full title of the book is AI Anarchy Inc., Profiting in a Decentralized World with Artificial Intelligence and Blockchain. It's available on Amazon now. I know you've received a review copy to take a look at it. What have you taken away from it?
A lot of people, when they talk about anarchy, they have this dystopic view of the future. And Patrick says it doesn't have to be that way at all, that there'll be a lot of social unrest. When you look at everybody being replaced by robots and artificial intelligence and so forth, that's real. Lots of people are going to lose their jobs. But there's also a lot of people who are going to benefit tremendously from the new future that's arising. We're sort of entering an era of exponential thinking. I mean, you really have to look at the world as changing so fast, and the speed of the change is going to increase dramatically.
So one example given from Patrick was that Washington University estimates that 40% of Fortune 500 companies that are around today will no longer exist in 10 years. So, but we've got all these technologies such as Bitcoin and open source and companies such as Uber jumping up. So what does it mean for the future? What sort of companies can we look for?
Kind of the big thing about anarchy is that it's decentralized. So if you think about blockchain, for example, if you use blockchain to sell a car or sell your house, then we've taken the banks out of the middle of that. And if you sell me the car, we've taken government agencies out of it. Like there isn't an obvious record that we have to report to various taxing agencies. So that's going to cause a lot of disruption. But that stuff is the future. There's no stopping it, right? You can ignore it for as long as you want, but you literally will be trampled, right? So A lot of this is that if we can create technology where we can have really high-end stuff where we all agree on it, and we don't have major corporations and we don't have governments interfering with us, that's a very, very different world than what we've grown up with in, say, the last 2,000 years.
And certainly for me personally, I think it's reaching a tipping point now. So I blogged just this past week or so on my Friday favorites on my blog there about a tool called Earn.com, which perhaps we'll cover in the future, Carl, but it's basically a way of getting paid to receive email. I don't want to digress too much, but basically this is Earn.com has opened my inbox up to quite a few pitches from blockchain companies, including companies that are using the blockchain, as you said, to monetize cars. I still haven't quite got my head around that one, I must admit. But the ones that caught my eye was being rewarded by the blockchain for likes on social media posts, and also decentralized rewards for books. So you and I are both authors, so this could change the way that we're rewarded for books rather than going down the traditional publication route, which I know you and I have both done. We've also both toyed with or published books through self-publishing, but the blockchain is going to mean that we actually can put stuff out there and get rewarded directly without any third parties in the way whatsoever.
Yes, imagine everybody gets irritated with Amazon taking all of the money, and decides, we can just distribute this without Amazon. Imagine the fall of Amazon. That's almost impossible for us to conceive of today. But if 40% of the Fortune 500 is going to disappear in the next 10 years, who says Amazon won't be part of that?
Absolutely. So interesting. And the book's called AI Anarchy Inc., Profiting in a Decentralized World with Artificial Intelligence and Blockchain. I think this is going to be one we come back to again and again this year. Certainly blockchain seems to be something that's really reaching a tipping point at the moment. But while we're on the subject of anarchy, the story that caught my eye this week was an interesting story, I think, about insurance. But before you doze off, it's actually it's the news that Apple and Cisco have teamed up to offer a cyber risk management solution supported by insurers Aon and Allianz. Sounds good, right? Well, here's the interesting part. The agreement will give businesses that use Apple and Cisco technology products specifically access to better terms for cyber security insurance. Judging by your reaction there, Carl, this is an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think broadly speaking, we talked about anarchy there. So not all anarchy is bad. We've got the blockchain, decentralized, but the anarchy that MSPs are specifically worried about at the moment is sort of protecting their clients against these cyber crimes. Now, the idea of mainstream insurance, cyber insurance by insurers Aon and Allianz strikes me as a really good thing. But I was particularly intrigued by the idea that this cyber insurance is going to give discounts if you're using Apple and Cisco technology products. What do you make of that, Carl?
Well, it makes it sound like Apple's taking business very seriously, which you can argue they haven't for the first, 50 years of their existence. So it'll be very interesting because I'm not sure, other than laptops, what Apple technology I'm going to be pulling into client businesses.
Well, the way it looks is this specific insurance policy involves an upfront security assessment. So you've got to go through a security assessment to get the discounted policy. But of course, what Apple and Cisco are really setting organizations up for is to use their products and services. And the foundation, of course, of this package is Apple's iOS environment, which the argument is it's tightly designed and integrated with security in mind. But of course, it asks the question, how many businesses are actually using Apple's iOS environments as their main platform? Everybody's got iPads, but how many clients do you know, Carl, that are using iOS as their main platform out there?
Zero.
Yeah, exactly. Cisco, not so much. Yeah, Cisco and their ransomware defense technology is fairly well used out there. But again, at the small business level, is it prevalence there with MSP clients? Not so much I'm seeing here in the UK.
Well, what's interesting for me is that you said they have to go through the security audit. I have had several conversations with people they got a client that wants to get insurance and they have to go through this security checklist. And they basically No small business can pass one of these things without a lot of remediation, especially if you want higher end liability insurance for disaster recovery or whatever. So what happens is that people fill out these forms and they just check the boxes that they think they're supposed to check and they get insurance. But my suspicion is that you wouldn't actually get a payout if you didn't answer that questionnaire honestly. So I'm hoping part of what I'm hearing here is that you have to actually pass the audit before you get the insurance.
And that's what I read into it too. So there is a big part here, isn't there, for MSPs to help people through these assessments. But that's only, as with everything else in the insurance industry, once people have got used to the fact that, hey, just ticking these boxes is actually false security, isn't it? You know, you can tick the boxes to say all is okay. But then if you go and get hit with a cybersecurity issue, let's just look at the statistics just for a moment here. So this article is from biztech.com, and they state in the article that in 2017, the average cost of a data breach in North America was $1.3 million for enterprises and $117,000 for small and medium-sized businesses. So that's no small change. And it's also not something that just affects the big companies. So do you think companies are going to take this seriously?
I hope so. I've been talking, like I said, to several people and speculating that this might be our next growth industry. I have worked with companies that have had these audits from big major companies, insurance companies and big partners. And sometimes these forms can be 200 pages, right? So there's a lot of money to be made in going through there, especially if you have to stop in the middle and say, okay, let's put in this piece. Because a lot of the questions have to do with physical security, and then they have to do with, obviously, electronic security. And do you have a firewall? And do you have a recovery policy, a recovery procedure? What does that look like? Attach it to this. You know, it's a huge, big deal. And so I think too many people, it's very much like GDPR and HIPAA, right? People are just ignoring it. Nobody cares about them. And as soon as the government cracks down, then they'll pay attention to it. But in the meantime, they're running their businesses in a way that they shouldn't.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at the statistics. For cybersecurity insurance is a fairly new thing. I've spoken to a lot of MSPs in the UK who have been asked about it by their clients. But the latest statistics I could get hold of were in October 2016, just 29% of businesses had even looked into cybersecurity insurance. However, at that same time in October 2017, that's risen to 32%. And that's from the Council of Insurance Agents giving those statistics there. So it's creeping up, isn't it? But still, how many businesses out there have got, let's say, professional indemnity insurance or buildings insurance or any of the traditional insurances? I'm going to say it's really high figure. But only 32% of small businesses have got cybersecurity insurance. Interesting.
Yeah, it's because partly I think there's too many people that grew up in the era where all of your data was in a box in the other room and you could always get to it. That day is gone.
Absolutely, yeah. So this is going to be an interesting story to keep an eye on. I particularly I think is the right word here, that Apple and Cisco are participating in this solution because I think it's a good indicator that cyber insurance is becoming a necessary part of an organization's response. And if the likes of Apple and Cisco are getting involved, it surely means that there's money to be made there and there's an opportunity. So going back to what you said, Carl, I think this is an opportunity for MSPs, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. It will become a big piece of our business, I believe, if people take it seriously.
So we'll keep an eye on that one as it goes forward. And as always, we're interested in your feedback, listener. What are you seeing in the cybersecurity market? Are people taking it seriously? Are you getting clients asking you about cybersecurity insurance? Is that something you could buddy up, perhaps with an insurer or a broker for? I'd be interested to hear how many MSPs are actually doing that already. What's going on for you in the next couple of weeks then, Carl? Are you out on the road?
Well, I do start my big 5-week class on making money in the cloud. That starts March 1st. And then I am off to Channel Pro, and then I start my own roadshow. So March is the month it all begins. Same
here. I'm out on the road at the start of March. I'm off to the CompTIA UK channel community in Bristol. That's a great community meeting there. We're expecting 100 plus MSPs for that one. And then the following week, I'll be in London for the Continuum European Partner Day as well. So looks like the travel is picking up for both of us. And I hope your man flu or your cold gets a lot better before, because I'm going to see you in April, aren't I, in New Orleans?
Yes, and you don't want me coughing on you.
Exactly. Well, a medicinal, maybe a bourbon down Bourbon Street might, put you just right there. We'll have to see how that goes, Carl.
Yeah, it's like health food in New Orleans.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, that's what's been going on. I'm Richard Tubb. That was Carl Palachuk, and we'll look forward to speaking to you again next time.
You're listening to Frankly MSP.
I'll put links to the articles and resources Carl and Richard discussed in today's show notes at avic.com/franklymsp/013. Now we come to my interview with Dom Price, head of R&D at Atlassian. They are the makers of Jira, which some of you may be familiar with. As I mentioned earlier in the show, Dom and I had a discussion about unlearning. Now, when I first heard of this concept, I must admit, I thought it was a little more hardcore. I was imagining a kind of active amnesia or a brain purge or something. And it actually reminded me of a story that I'd heard once about Einstein. So Einstein had a notoriously poor memory for a lot of things and couldn't even remember his own phone number. And someone asked him about it once, and he said, well, why would I remember something that I could so easily look up in a book? And of course, what I take away from this is the idea that space in our brain is precious, and we should be careful how we use that space. And with unlearning, I was intrigued by the idea that we could free up space or create new space in our brain by pushing other things that we don't need anymore, out of it. Now, as it turns out, unlearning is not quite so intense as wiping something from your brain and your memory. It's more about where we turn our focus. But this interview with Dom raises some very interesting possibilities about productivity and efficiency and focus, especially for leaders. So let's have a listen. Hi, Dom. Welcome to Frankly MSP.
Thanks for having me.
So happy to have you here today. I first came across your name and this concept of unlearning in a magazine article, and I was really fascinated with the idea of unlearning. So first off, let's start with defining it. What is unlearning?
So unlearning is the subtle art of kind of forgetting, but forgetting on purpose. It's around saying, what are the things that are no longer habitually valuable to me? And how do I cease those rituals? How do I stop them? And so that I can replace that time with something more valuable. What are the times when you pause, you look around, you reflect, and you purposefully select things to stop doing? It's one of those things that when you do it, it becomes a very liberating and actually quite addictive exercise.
So this is something that I've not heard of before. How did you come up with this concept or come across it?
I would love to be able to trademark it, claim it as my own, be classified as some kind of genius. Sadly, that is not true. I actually heard about it when I was in New York, and someone was challenging me. A lady by the name of Sophie Wade, who I do some work with in New York, she was challenging me on the topic when she understood the rate of change that I was going through in my working life at Atlassian, the number of customers we have, the competitors we've got, the people we hire, the locations we're in, the products we have. And she said to me, you're in this exponential changing world. Are you changing? And there was that kind of awkward moment of pause where I was like, I don't know, like am I? Because if I'm not changing at the same rate as the organization I'm in or the environment I'm in, effectively I'm going backwards. Effectively, I'm a drag coefficient on the organization. I thought I was a catalyst, but maybe I'm slowing the organization down. So it gave me a great chance to say, what rituals did I adapt and adopt when I was first at Atlassian, which is a very different environment than 6 and 12 and 18 months later. And I had this kind of quite profound realization, actually, that I was adding things. I was trying to do more. And when that realization kicked in, that was the liberating point where I was like, oh my God, every time something new comes up, I embrace it and cherish it. But all I'm doing is using an extra set of energy to try and accomplish. I'm not taking anything out. And so if there's only 24 hours in the day, which I think is one of the few things in the world we can all agree on these days, there is only 24 hours. And I want to sleep and I want to hang out with friends and have fun and eat and socialize and all those other things. But how can I make that time where I work the most effective? Talking through that with Sophie was one of these amazing exercises of realization that I'd not been disciplined there and that actually the accidental habit that I had was just trying to do more. But trying to do more as a human just doesn't scale. So it gave me that chance to go, well, how do I change that?
That's fascinating because I think a lot of us feel that pressure, especially in IT, where so much is changing all the time. And, the advice is always to be constantly learning new things, but no one's talking about letting go of the old things. So let's get into the logistics of this. How do you go about unlearning something?
So the first thing I did, this is classic irony of trying to be a high achiever and failing miserably, was I collated a whole lot of material on unlearning and I read about it extensively. I did what I think most knowledge workers do. I acquired the knowledge and not the practice. One of my realizations and one of my claims is that if I think about team dysfunction or human dysfunction, it's the gap between what you know and what you do. And so unlearning isn't about knowing. Like it's pointless to know the ins and outs of unlearning if you don't practice it. So having realized that I was making the classic mistake, I just sat there and thought, this is one of those things that I need to just do it, appreciate and accept that I'm probably going to be wrong and mess this up as I go along. And so I just sat there and thought, what's the easiest ritual? What's the easiest way I can practice this? I do something called the 4 L's. I do this exercise. First time I did it, it was fun, still fun today, kind of 18 months on. It's loved, longed for, loathed, and learned. This is a ritual not dissimilar to like a retrospective in the agile world that you would do with a software team, but I do it with myself. I use the end of the quarter. It tends to be when there's a lot of milestone-y type events on, and I sit there at the end of the quarter and I go, right, I look at my leadership style, my accomplishments, my way of working, the things I've done in the last quarter, and I say, right, what did I love? What are the things that I really enjoyed? And the things that I love, that I value and enjoy and I'm good at, I should do more of those. That's an important step because there's a weird thing happening in the knowledge economy right now where we all seem to be focusing on weaknesses. I'm like, no, let's look at the things that I'm good at. I should acknowledge that and pat myself on the back for it. If it is a superpower, I should consider doing more of it. So loved is a good step. The next 2 steps are the fascinating part for me. So the longed for and the loathed. The longed for is the thing I wish I'd done. It was the marginal thing that I didn't have the time or the energy or the investment to do. The thing is, I can't add in a longed for if I don't take out a loathed. So I'm forcing myself to say, in doing this exercise, my time is the constraint. My time, whether it be my energy or actual physical time, is the constraint. So what's the thing that I've loathed and how can I stop doing that? And what happens is over time, the loathed, they start off as things that are broken, right? So we could all do this exercise today and you'll find a whole lot of things you loathe about your last quarter and they're dead easy, right? You don't like them anymore. They're not working. You stop them. What happens is as you get better at this exercise, the loathed, they're no longer things that are broken. They're just things that aren't going to pay as big a dividend next quarter as they did last quarter. So it gives you a chance to actually get ahead of the curve. And you say, this ritual that I did, this stand-up, this meeting, this whatever the ritual is, it works really well last quarter. But if I look at the environment and the scenario I'm in next quarter, I just don't think it's going to work as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop it before it breaks. And I'm going to try something different instead. And that's where the learned comes in, which is how do I make sure each quarter I'm learning? Learning requires the freedom of space and time and mindset, because learning by definition is probably a new experience. And if I'm already full, if I'm just adding new things in, I'm probably not learning. Right? I'm just doing and failing. So it gives me this ability to really stay focused and make sure the things I'm doing are high impact and that I purposely select things that I think won't pay a dividend and stop doing them. And once you get used to that exercise, which is the simplest kind of unlearning exercise I practice, it's so liberating. It's kind of quite scary.
You're listening to Frankly MSP.
Is there a difference between unlearning and, say, delegating something out of your loathe column or just not doing it?
You're picking holes in the way I did this wrong when I first did it. Again, natural kind of human inclination. The very first time you go through this unlearning exercise, you're like, well, I can't possibly stop anything because everything I do is exceptionally important. The world, let's be honest, the world would come to a grinding halt if I stopped doing everything. And so I must make sure all things get done still. So all I'll do is I'll spread them round. One of our co-founders, Scott, he calls it peanut buttering. Like whenever we're doing planning and we have this habit of, instead of stopping things, how can we spread them around? He'll stop the room and go, guys, girls, we're peanut buttering. And we're just spreading this so thinly. And the thing is, when you put peanut butter on toast, you put a good amount on because it tastes nice. When you spread peanut butter really thinly, it's a bit blah. And so it's this thing of going, if you want to have impact, do less things and do them well. And if you delegate, you're not unlearning. In fact, worse, you're creating a negative multiplier. Because what you do is, I take something that I don't find valuable and I give it to someone else to do who's not good at it. So they're slower at it. They learn to get good at it and it becomes a norm for them, even though it's not valuable to the organization. So I'm not saying delegation is bad. I'm saying only delegate the things that look like they will continue to add value. They're just not the right thing for me to do. Versus unlearning is saying that ritual just doesn't pay off for the organization. So unlearning has to be a bit selfish and selfless. So you have to be very honest with yourself in doing that exercise to make sure that you stop the right things.
So in that vein, you do unlearning on your own for yourself. Do other members of the team at Atlassian also use this?
Yeah, so we've started to share it. Lucy, the way rituals at Atlassian tend to get adopted is bottoms up. They get adopted through practice, through storytelling, through experimentation. So I've shared with a couple of people, some that I mentor, some that I work with. The very last thing I'm ever going to do is enforce it because that kind of ruins the spirit and the intent of what it's there for. What I find is most of the people that I work with at Atlassian have come to work with the growth mindset. And so they naturally don't do some element of unlearning anyway, because they have this desire to grow, to challenge the status quo, to experiment and to explore. What I'm finding is it's more profound for leaders. I can't prove this scientifically to you, but one of the things I'm sensing from some of the leaders I've been working with is there's this assumed pressure that leaders put themselves under to be right. And I think it's going to be the death. Certainly, the key to failure for most leaders is this bizarre view that you're at a certain level in the organization chart, and now you have to be right more often. And so unlearning for them is often around role change. What are the things that I did in my previous role that are still valuable to the organization, but I have to stop doing? And that talks to your delegation point. They're the things that as an organization we still want to occur, but they're not the right thing for me to do. So how can I personally unlearn them?
What are some of the biggest benefits that you've personally gained from this practice of unlearning?
A couple of things, really. One is time. Like I've had this realization, I don't know if it's like a career stage or a lifestyle thing, that I've always thought that there were many precious resources in the world. And I've come to the realization there's actually only one precious resource. And it's the time that we have. It's the most important gift that we can give each other. And yet, what I was trying to do in my career in trying to be all things to all people was I was just spending my time quite frivolously. And when you think about the trade-off, in doing event X, I don't get to spend time with family, or I don't get to go to this social event. Suddenly, when you spend it as a trade-off, it's a lot more impactful. And so for me, unlearning's about been saying, are there any habits that are clogging up my time where I've got lazy and complacent? We're actually taking them out. I now have to challenge myself to work out, how do I better invest that time? And do I invest it in me? Do I invest it in mindfulness? Do I invest it in the team? Do I invest it in mentoring and coaching and others? Do I invest it in growing myself? Do I go on a course? Do I seek out mentorship? So it really forces you to think about how you invest that time for marginal benefit and marginal cost. And that I think is just a healthy exercise to do anyway. And then the second one, which is probably a harder thing to learn and get benefit from, is I've got a lot better at failing. So what happens is when you first go through the unlearning exercise, you get this gift which says, here's 3 hours I was spending on this. Now I've decided it was a mundane task. So now I've got these 3 hours back. I've got to pick something to do with them. And what I realize, and this has become part of the exercise now, is when I pick something new, there's every chance it's going to fail because I've not done it before and I'm trying it for the first time. And so for years, I realized that I'd been going around talking about fear of failure, experimentation, innovation. And then I kind of realized I wasn't doing that. I wasn't practicing that. And now I get to. And it's a very humbling experience when you get given this freedom of time to go and invest, and you realize that picking the thing to do is really hard. And not only is it hard, but it doesn't come with certainty. And so it's a great reminder that as a leader, the people around you, the world around you, there is this ambiguity and uncertainty. And we have a habit of creating control functions or comfort blankets that make us feel better, that make us feel the world's more predictable and that we are in control, when in reality we're not. So they're probably the two things that I think have been the biggest lessons for me.
There's so much to think about here. What's one thing you would want managed service providers in the audience today to take away from our conversation?
It's probably more around the environment. Like if someone thinks that unlearning is not the thing for them, I'm fine with that. You've got to find the right sort of technique for you. The challenge I lay down to people, if you're not going to do something like this, whatever your flavor might be, then what you're actually saying is that the environment you're in is static and predictable and controllable. And I think in the short term, the next day, the next week, the next month, most of us probably have that certainty and control, or it feels like we do. But the problem is when we take an honest step back and have a think about it, the impact we want to have, the outcomes we want to achieve, they tend to be on a longer time horizon than we can control. I think one of the killers of corporate innovation is quarterly or weekly goal setting. Because innovation is about taking a chance and planting a seed. And if I plant a seed today, it's not going to turn into a tree this quarter. So if you set me the goal of trees, I'm going to go and buy a forest and I'm going to trim that forest and I'm going to kill the forest. Whereas actually what you really want me to do is to go and plant a whole lot of seeds. And so understanding the longer term impact of what you want to achieve and saying, what is the right amount of time for me to invest in speculation, in planting seeds, and what's the right amount of time for me to be spending looking at how I forest and how I prune and culture and nurture. So unlearning can be a hard thing where you just it's around saying, I haven't got infinite amount of time and the world I'm in is changing fast. And as soon as you accept that, you inadvertently accept that you have to change. So just being honest that we have to drive our own change.
Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing your insights with us today, Dom.
Thanks for having me. It's been great chatting.
That was Dominic Price, Head of R&D at Atlassian. If you're interested in knowing more about Dom or about Unlearning, I'll put some information in the show notes, including the Inc. magazine article where I first came across the idea. You'll find those show notes at avik.com/franklymsp/013. And that's a wrap. Remember, comments are enabled in our show notes now, so tell us what you think. Will you use Unlearning? Will you check out that book, Anarchy Inc., that Carl and Richard discuss? Are you interested in that cyber insurance that Carl and Richard discussed? Let us know. Till next time, this is Jennifer Tribe. Thanks for listening.
Frankly MSP, brought to you by Avik Networks, the most efficient and profitable way to manage your clients' networks.